Hi and welcome to Hedgehog Hollow. Today we're going to be showing you 3 ways to use the Craft Tangles leafy stencil in some different ways other than just adding ink through it. We're going to be looking at using different coloured texture paste to make your own custom colours. We're going to be looking at using Pearl-Ex, and we're going to be looking at doing some resist with the stencil for a more mixed media and grungy feel. So let's get started. So for our first project, we're going to be using some VersaMark with the leafy background, and we're also going to be using it with our Pearl-Ex, which is the same as Perfect Pearls. Now underneath I have taped this piece down, and I have done the faux matting technique that you may have seen me do before. So I take my masking tape and I'm actually going to mask off as evenly as I can by eye all the way around about 1/4 inch, and that means it looks like when we take this off we have a mat all the way around our piece, but we don't have to layer it onto another piece of cardstock. Now this is black drawing paper, so it's a little bit more sturdy than black cardstock. I'm going to place my leaf stencil over the top here. Love this leafy background, it's so pretty and delicate. And then we're going to take our VersaMark and we're just going to ink through our stencil, and you want to be quite generous. Hold down your stencil to make sure it doesn't move on you. And I would just go over your piece a couple of times. It won't matter if you're missing a few little bits. You won't notice it at the end. Okay, and I'm just going to lift this up because then underneath I can see if there's anywhere just in the center here it needs a little bit more. And as long as you only lift one bit of tape up and not both, you'll be fine. I'm going to do a tiny bit down here at the bottom. And this is going to be a great way to do a really simple, easy card. Got no stamping at all on today's cards. Okay. So then we can remove this. Now I'm doing this project first because when you're working with Pearl-Ex or Perfect Pearls, you want everything to be completely dry. So I'm going to wash this stencil quite a few times over today's video, so we're going to do this one first while everything is still really dry. Now I've grabbed a few different colours. I've got a selection pack and I grabbed out some russet, there's some different golds, there's a rose gold, and there's some different silvers. So I'm just going to take the lids off. And we'll just kind of experiment as we go. You can see these beautiful colours. There's so many different things we can do with these Perfect Pearls. We can add gum arabic and do all sorts of fun things with them. But I think I'm going to try and stick with some reds and golds. But we'll keep them all open and see where we go. So let's add some gold. And as soon as you just start spreading it over, it's going to stick to that VersaMark. So we want to do a few different patches. We'll choose a different gold. I'll touch in a few more patches. And we'll blend it all together in a moment. We'll touch in a few red areas and a few of kind of the pinks and the russets. And then what we can do is, I'm going to just turn it on a tilt because I'm left-handed, is I'm going to polish this up. And that's actually ended up a little bit more red than I intended, but that's fine. Every single one you do will be different unless you do a single colour. We can also go in with some golds and it'll pick up some more of that pigment. And you can see there that beautiful background that you can create. Almost looks like foiling, but it's much, much easier than doing a foil. So there you go. So that's our background piece. I'm just going to clear this off and I'll show you how to assemble your card. We're pretty much there. So I've untaped everything. I've got my Neenah Solar White card base here. I'm just going to fold this in half. And I'm going to do it with my finger because I haven't pre-scored it. And then this is our black panel. You can see that lovely crisp edge that we get on it through the masking and that lovely shimmer that we have from that Pearl-Ex. And I'm just going to use some foam pieces to pop it up a little bit. As I say, this is black drawing paper, so it stands up to water and all kinds of things you want to throw at it a little bit more than regular black cardstock. And we'll want to have it that way up. So you can see there it looks like I've got far more layers than I actually do. And then I pre-made some of these words the other day when I was doing another video. I'll link this up in the blog post on Hedgehog Hollow if you want to know how to make your own glittered words. But I have a little stack of these now next to me. And they're great to just embellish a card or add a simple sentiment with. Oh, it's incredibly sticky, this adhesive, so you will stick to it all over the place like I am. And I start with my O, work over to my H, and then just sort out the middle. And this is a 2-layer sentiment, so if you're watching that video you'll see that I do different ones with multiple layers, and this is a 2-layer one. And that is your finished card. Really effective, lots of sparkle. You could use it for masculine or feminine. You could add any sentiment you wanted along the bottom here. But that is project 1 done. So let's move on to project 2. So one quick thing just before we move into project 2 I wanted to let you know is I would advise putting some kind of sealant over this, and the best thing for these, because otherwise they'll just rub off with friction, is just hairspray. So I will take these upstairs later and I will just put a quick coat of hairspray over it, and that will stop your Pearl-Ex just rubbing off, so it just gives it that final sheen. So now we can move on to our second project. We're going to be looking at using texture paste inside a stencil. So again, this is the Canson watercolor cold press 140 pound. I like something pretty rigid when I'm working with texture paste, and I've done the foam matting about 1/4 of an inch around the edge. So this time you're going to want to stick down your stencil fairly well, because you're going to move it around quite a lot and you don't want it to move on you. And this time I'm going to do a different orientation to my card. So I'm going to turn my stencil, and I want some of these finer details in here. So I am going to be quite generous on the tape, and this is just my painter's tape. Again, everything's linked up on the Craft Tangles blog and on the Hedgehog Hollow blog. And I'm just working on a Gessobord. You get a few of them for very inexpensive cost. You can use them over and over, and maybe once a year I switch out to a new one. So that's our setup ready to go. Now we're going to prep our texture paste, because we're going to make some coloured texture pastes. I'm going to use, I've got a few different distress inks and distress oxides. You can use them both in here. And this is some cracked pistachio. And I'm also going to use the distress ink cracked pistachio, which is still in its plastic casing. So I'm just taking that off. Because I loved the oxides so much, I decided to invest. Now, I probably won't end up using all of these, but I like to have a selection there, and then I can dip in and out as I want to. We're going to start with some texture paste. This is the opaque matte texture paste. And I'm just going to stir it up a little bit. And you don't need a lot. So that is more than enough. And you can always make more really easily anyway. And then I'm going to add some Nouveau shimmer paste to it. This will just give it a nice glittery feel. So that's just a tiny little bit on the end of my palette knife. And then we're going to mix it up so it's well mixed. So you get that white opaque, but it just has a little bit of sparkle, and we all like that little bit of sparkle. So there we go. So I'm just mixing this in. Actually, I think I might add a little bit more glitter paste. This is one of those recipes you just kind of get a feel for, and you keep going until you have the desired amount of glimmer. It'll make your glitter paste go further too. And it makes it a nice solid white. Now I'm going to add some different colours of distress inks, excuse me, just around the edge here. And you can see I'm not really adding much. Pile these up. And you're going to want lots of kitchen towels, so let me just grab some of that too. And I'm going to put this at the top of the frame here, just over the side so you can see it. And I'm going to grab my board. So this is the #1 spatula. Again, I just buy an inexpensive set. I'm going to mix in a little bit of yellow to make some yellow paste. And sometimes you may need a second one of these just to help you move things around. A bit like when you're baking with spatulas. And you can mix it till you've got a nice yellow shade. And then I'm going to pick up some of that yellow and I'm just going to smear it on. And we'll mix all the colours together at the end. While I'm on yellows, I'm going to take another bit of the glimmer paste and I'm going to mix it in with the yellow distressed oxide fossilized amber. And if there's not enough ink, we can add some more. Here it is. And I'm just starting off with little bits, particularly in the yellows, because I just want some yellows around the corners. And I'm just turning this. And I'm going to put some yellow down there as well. And finally I'll scrape up all of the leftover yellow. And we'll put some, and it will move around and blend as we add more colours in. Now I'm going to just wipe off my yellows. And you don't need to clean it or wash it or anything like that, but I just want to make sure that there's not too much left on there. I'm going to start with a little bit of cracked pistachio, and I'm just going to kind of divvy out my texture paste around these greens. And it doesn't matter if they mix because we're going to mix them all anyway. So let's start with a little bit of this green. And you may want to go for more of a rainbow. You can kind of mix in any colours you like. And we're just going to work in patches. So there's one patch. This is a darker green here. And I'm just mixing it in. And as I say, you can add more ink to give you a more intense shade, less ink for the lighter shade because that white will mix in. And I think I'm going to go for a little bit more of that darker shade. So I'm going to take some more mowed lawn here. And I'm going to mix this in. Grab a bit more from the middle. And this is just one of those processes you want to just keep going around until we have filled in all of our stencil. So now we've covered in all over. You can see I've worked with the different shades of greens. I've got some darker ones here, lighter ones here, and there's still that lovely yellows towards the bottom. Now another reason you want to work with a small amount of time is it dries really quickly. So even by the end of finishing this is starting to dry out on me, and in a second I'm going to go and just run it under some warm water along with the stencil. Now before this dries, you want to remove your stencil and masking tape, because otherwise it's going to be really difficult to do afterwards. It's worth mentioning that if you end up with too much excess, you can just scrape it over like this. Or alternatively, I always keep to hand one of these little squeegee tools, and I'll link this up as well. And you can then just pull this over the top as well, and it will just even things out. There's a couple of little tips there depending on how much you end up with. It's a bit like icing a cake. It's just trial and error. So then you want to just carefully lift up your stencil and you'll be left with that beautiful resist underneath. And while this is still wet, we're also going to lift off our foam masking or matting, because again, otherwise you'll get some wrinkled edges. You want to do this while it's wet. And I'm just going to leave this on the board to dry, maybe for about 15-20 minutes, and then we can mat it up onto our card base. So our piece is now dry, and you've got those beautiful shades in it, those greens and yellows, beautiful spring-like colours in there. Now we're going to mount it onto a card base. I've chosen some Neenah Desert Sand for this one, just to give it a more natural feel with those leaves in there. And one of my staple, just a die cut hello. If you want to know where the die cut's from, again, visit the blog. Everything's linked up for you. And I'm going to stick this onto here. And here's my hello that we're going to stick on the back. I did put a little bit of double-sided adhesive. It doesn't go quite to the bottom. I had a little scrap that I popped on there, but that will work fine. This double-sided adhesive is absolutely great for these really fine things. It just means that I have a little bit more taking off the back just because it cuts off on that strip. It doesn't join together, but no worries. So again, I'm going to start on my O, and this will stick onto that texture paste, and just kind of fan your letters down until you get to the first one. There we go. I love these hello cards because when I'm ready to send it, I can put the appropriate sentiment on the inside, whether it's a get well soon, whether it's just stopping by, a thank you, all sorts of things. Hello covers a multitude of our card needs. So let's move on to project 3. So for our final project, again, I've taped down a piece of my black artist paper, done my faux 1/4 inch matting all the way around, and I've taped down my stencil well. Now I've taped it down because we're going to use some distressed collage medium, and then we're going to use it to give us the inverse of the stencil with our colour this time. So everywhere there's plastic will be where our colour is, and everywhere else will just be plain. I'm going to use my distress brush. This is the Distress Collage Medium Crazing. Everything will be linked up on the blog, so if you want to know where anything came from, or you can't quite catch the name during the video, you can go back. I'm just going to use this piece off the top. And you want to be reasonably liberal. You don't want to be too thick because otherwise it will take too long to dry, but at the same time you want to make sure you've got everywhere covered. You'll need to leave this to dry for again about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll add our colour to our image. And again, while it's wet, I'm going to remove all of this tape as well. You can then just wash your stencil with warm water and some dish soap, and your brushes as well, exactly the same way. So now we're ready to add some colour. I'm using my Finetec iridescent palette, and because it's not that easy to tell what the colours are, I always just keep the lid upside down, or the box rather, upside down on my lid, so that I can see what colour I'm going for because they're in the same order inside. Now I'm going to start off with this lovely green. Now these look like nothing until you use them on some black cardstock or paper. If you've seen me use them before, you'll know how gorgeous they are. And I'm going to add mostly green, and I'm just going to add a few splashes of gold, because afterwards we're going to add, once this is all dry, we'll add even more colour. Now what you'll notice is those places where we've used the crazing are slightly cracked, and they're resisting most of this green paint, which will give us a wonderful effect. So I'm just going all over with this wash. I'm going to add a little bit more water just with my dropper bottle here. And you'll notice some of the paint when you're going will go into those wonderful cracks. I'm also just going to grab a bigger brush because it will be better for my wash, and I really want it to be nice and even. Let's grab some clean water onto that brush as well. So I have got my rinse well. If you haven't seen that, again, check out our channel. But I'm just using my water pot here just to really bring out some of that colour. Now you might find your paper goes really warped like this is going. What I'll do is I'll let it dry, and then I'll run it just through the Big Shot. No dye, just through my cutting plates, and that will straighten out most of my issues there. I think I am going to add still a touch of gold. And I'll blend that in with some more green. And when I've got other colours going in, I'm going to add some of that golden copper like this. And I'll blend some of it out with the green. So watercolours is very much an evolution. You'll find you may go and add more than one layer. Sometimes you're happy with your first layer. I like the dimension in that. That's mostly green with some hints of other things. So again, leave this to dry for 5 to 10 minutes. You may want to give it a helping hand with your heat it tool. Just keep going over it. Just be careful not to crack that crazing too much, and I'll come back once it's dry. So now we can finish up our project. I did have a few issues and I wanted to share them with you. So my piece was really warped, so I mounted it just on a piece of plain white cardstock just to give it a little bit more sturdiness. I also had some leakage underneath my tape. I hadn't pressed it down enough, so I just trimmed it up, and then I decided that I'm going to do a black card base with a white layer underneath and then that black, just for a little bit more drama. You can either then write on the inside with a chalk pen, some Kirana pens, or you can add a white panel and then write directly inside that. Now, one final thing I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to put this on its matting layer, because otherwise I could end up here in quite a mess. My preferred adhesive is the Funky Tape Runner. It's under $3 for a runner. It lasts for ages and it's super, super strong. It's from Tonic. Again, all links are in the blog post below the video in the description. So I'm going to stick that onto my white panel, and I'm going to add the foam that I'm going to be using. My big roll of foam here. This is the Scotch Big Mama roll. It's super, super value. Again, I'll link it all up for you in the best places to purchase. And I'm just going to add some foam down each side. This foam is really strong. You could even add multiple layers if you want something a little bit higher with a bit more drama. It's entirely up to you. But it is Scotch and it's designed to put pictures and things up, so it will last you really well. Then I'm going to stick this onto my black card base. Again, just a piece of 8.5 by 11 that I've cut lengthways ready for my base. And then we can add our finishing touches. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it this way up so my leaves face the right way up. I'm going to put that down. I'm then going to take a little bit of this Inca Gold, which is a little mousse, and I'm going to try and lift up this piece that always seems to stick down. Here we are. Now you need a tiny, tiny amount, so I'm just going to use it like this on my fingertip. One of these will probably last you forever. And I'm just going to pick out a couple of areas where I'm really going to highlight where it's crazed into that textured crackle. And it just adds that little bit of aging. You can get these in multiple colours. All links, again, are there for you if you are interested in looking it up. You can get them in golds and silvers and pinks and all sorts. But because this is more of that mixed media, grungy kind of card, I wanted it more to look a little bit rusty and rustic and old. So I'm just adding this in to pick up some texture. If you feel you've added too much, you can keep rubbing and you can rub it back off again. So you can even just add it very lightly, so it'll just go into some of the deeper grooves. And I just like how it gives it that nice grungy finish. And we'll finish it off with another high, because as I say, they're really versatile sentiments. Just going to put this away because otherwise we'll have copper everywhere. Best thing to clean it off your hands is a baby wipe, and we have plenty of those with a chili in the house. So I'll just wipe off my fingers. And now we can add our high. Now this one I forgot to put adhesive on. So I'm going to use my Nouveau Deluxe adhesive and one of my micro brushes, and I'm just going to use this to apply a thin coat on those areas. The Deluxe adhesive is really nice and strong. Again, it's a Tonic product, and the micro brush will give you a thin coat so it doesn't squelch out the edges. And I don't want to detract anything from my really rustic look. And this is the dot for the eye. So I'm then just going to stick that down there. So that is our third and final project. I hope you've enjoyed today's video on different ways to use your stencils, something a little bit different than just adding ink through them as we normally would. Be sure to join us again next time here on the HNDMD website, and also subscribe to the Hedgehog Hollow YouTube channel. We'll see you again soon. Happy stamping! Bye!